Today I want to give you a full guide for Forondil, everything you need to know to start getting crazy amounts of merits ambushing players in the back lines, which is, I think, the primary role of Forondil. And don't get it confused, that's not farm killing, that's not hitting people in resource nodes. I mean, you'll do that, but the point is to ambush weak troops or unsuspecting troops that are going to or from a fight. And people will be critical and say that's sissy stuff. Hey, that's filling the enemy's hospital, and if you want to win, you need to fill your enemy's hospitals, so stick around in this video for everything you need to know. Talents, pairings, artifact, pet, to absolutely smash your enemies and rack up those merits. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Call of Dragons. And during the fighting, in our season 2, pulled down over 23 million merits in total. I did 0 merit farming all season. And during our fight for the Dragon Zone, I pulled down almost 5 million merits in the first 24 hours of the fight. So how did I do that? What was I doing? And Forondil was, in my estimation, a big part of the reason I was able to rack up a lot of merits. So let's talk about Forondil, everything you need to know to get really amazing results. And I'll say, really, before we even get into that, we need to understand what are the types of fighting in this game. And there's really 2 types of fighting that I can think of offhand. One is taking advantage of enemy lack of preparedness and hitting backline positions. The other is frontline fighting and really smashing your enemy to push progress at an objective. I did a lot of both of those things, and to not be doing both of those things is, in my opinion, a mistake. But a part of the reason I can do this, and a part of the reason that Forondil is such a strong hero for me to be working with, is that I am the Spring Wardens. Now, I'm not saying everybody should be Spring Wardens, but I just want to mention for a moment that Forondil is a flying hero, which means if you're the Spring Wardens and you use the Eagles, you've got a flying cavalry unit, and that unit is extremely powerful. In fact, it's important to understand when we look at his skills, when we look at his talents, that if you use the Eagles, when you charge an enemy, you are going to instantly use your active skills if it is a ranged unit. That's what you need to understand, is you instantly use your rage skills. All right. So the first thing we've got to do with any hero review is obviously look at their skills. We talked about how they're a flyer, but what do the skills of Forondil actually do? The active skill only does 1,200 damage factor, which is actually weak in my opinion, but the target gains cowardice. Any normal attacks launched automatically miss for 3 seconds. That is pretty brutal. I don't know if that influences their rate of rage gain, but it definitely influences the damage they're dealing to whatever they're targeting, if they're even targeting anything. I mean, this is actually a powerful active skill if the enemy is attacking stuff, but like really unhelpful if they aren't directly attacking anything, which is sometimes the case when you chase folks down. From here, death from above, 10% defense penetration. It ain't much, but every bit of defense penetration stacks up, and I suspect that there's a sort of non-linear effect of gaining more defense penetration. What I'm trying to say is that the more defense penetration you have, the better I think defense penetration is. From there, the Song of Swiftness. Now, if Forondil is the primary, you get 20% march speed and 10% damage dealt. That's how I use him. If he is the secondary or deputy, then the hero skill damage dealt is boosted by 10% and your rage cost is reduced by 50. That's quite nice. Rage cost is listed on the active skill. From here, the 4th skill, aiming high. Your legion gains an attack boost, 40%, but every 20 seconds you lose 5% of that. This is kind of a weird one because you definitely will at times lose this attack boost entirely, but for the purpose of ambushing someone, even if you have to then run away, you get a lot of punch right away, and there is value to that. From here, the Awakening skill. So when Forondil's Legion launches a normal attack against a Legion that has cowardice. Now remember, right now, I think Forondil is the only one that can inflict cowardice. You've got a 50% chance of inflicting a defense break of 20% and a slow of 20% for 3 seconds. This can only be triggered once every 5 seconds. So the way this works is You basically charge a ranged unit, ideally. You use your active skill, and then every normal attack following that, you're hoping to hit them with the slow or a defense break. It's very powerful. Now, I don't have it, obviously, and why is that? Well, Forondil is in the Wheel of Fortune. We just completed Season 2, where we had Forondil on the Lucky Spins, and I expect he will be back in the Lucky Spins in Season 2+, so I think I'm going to get to spin for him again. So, right now, I'm slow rolling, working on Forondil, because I think I can get more value from Lucky Spins, and that value is worth a lot to me. I hope that will be the case. I will be actually pretty disappointed if it's not. So, Forondil is really powerful, and he doesn't even have skills committed to being a flyer, weirdly enough. So you can use him on the ground, you can use him in the air. There are a bunch of different combos. Why don't we talk about the combos before we talk about the talents, which is unusual. Usually I kind of do this the other way around. But if I'm on the ground, the combo I want to use is Forondil primary with a Bakshi secondary. I found this worked extremely well, and I got very good results. This is basically, I think, your hardest hitting cavalry unit for pure fielding. Okay? From here, if you are flying, you have a bunch of options, and they're all good. I've paired with Thea, and you basically make a sort of tanky flyer. It's not ideal because, I mean, at the end of the day, you kind of want to hit hard and hit fast, and shields I find to be generally very unimpressive. So you can pair with Thea, and I do love the extra march speed boost. You do go very fast. From here, we've got to talk about Freygar. So Freygar would be a pay-to-win hero. I mean, you have to get her from Lucky Spins if you're going to go for her. And I find that she was, in some ways, better than Thea. I mean, she's also a flyer, but what's nice is that she's more focused on damage rather than shielding. And very little of her kit cares about marksman, but some of it is exclusive to marksman. But this will help you eke out a good bit more damage. This is actually the pair I primarily used all season long. That is because I was running 2 flying combos. I was running Forondil paired with Freygar, and I was using Thea paired with Craig. So Craig is the final, I think, really good pair that you could do with Forondil, and that is because there's just so much skill damage. I love this. Craig is deceptively good. It's an actually insane amount of skill damage from an epic hero. You're looking at 800 damage factor, plus 2 nearby legions also get hit with 300 damage factor, and all targets that take damage also bleed. For 3 seconds, you do 200 damage factor per second. It's a lot of damage, is what I'm trying to say. So I really like the Craig pairing. If I were making one pairing, like purely for ambushing, I think it might actually be Forondil with Craig. Even though he's not legendary, the raw damage is, I think, just better than the damage over time you're getting by virtue of normal attacking an enemy. They could always run away from you, right? Better than what you're getting from Thea, who's shielding. I think the one combo, if you're going to run it, is Forondil with Craig. Now, that said, there is another flyer, that's Atheist, but remember, flying cavalry are doing physical damage, so you don't want to use Atheist because you don't do any active skill damage if you pair physical damage with a magic hero. That is a bad call. So that's the only other flyer. So you don't have that many flyers. So we give the head nod here to the flyers section. I recognize not everyone will be running flying combos. Your ground combo is really obvious here. It's the Bakshi. If you were a whale, right, you could also consider Theodore. And I think the advantage here is that they have debuff synergy. So Forondil is sort of going to care about debuffs. We'll talk about that more in a bit. Theodore does have a debuff here. I think that would be a fine pairing. I mean, obviously, you could pair with Emrys, and Emrys has Rage Restoration, which is powerful. You could pair with Alistair, who's got area of effect damage, right? Like, all of these things you could do. Haven't even unlocked the Awakening on him, apparently. Just had to click the button this season. But let's get into the talents. Because I think at this point, we've covered the majority of the, like, truly viable combos here. I mean, I suppose on the ground, you could use Eliana if you wanted to be really tanky. That just seems kind of weird to me, but whatever. So let's talk about the talents, all right? You've got a couple options, and I think this core build is probably the way you want to go. So here's what I did, and I found this to be great. The first thing I think you want to do is actually make your way over to the cavalry tree. The reason is that you get extra goodness for the same amount of talent points. So on the left here, I'm getting 15% of March speed for 5 points. On the right, I'm getting 10% of March speed for 5 points. There's a restriction here. You have to be using cavalry, but like you should be using cavalry with Forondil, in my opinion. I suppose, like, is he really married to cavalry? The defense penetration doesn't care. When you're leading a cavalry legion, you gain these buffs. So that skill does care. I mean, weirdly enough, I suppose that he actually is usable in a non-cavalry situation. But, like, he's got a near attack range, so you're going to do what? Infantry? Like, I don't think he's a particularly exciting infantry hero. Not at all. I mean, you want tankiness. He has none of that. So whatever, back to the talents after that silly distraction, okay? Core talents, your foundation talents, you get the march speed and you get the health, easy choices. Over here, balanced heart gives you more march speed, love to see it, and attack. From there, you got to take the march speed, you love to see that. I went with a hero skill damage taken reduction to make myself more tanky. Now, if you're going to be pairing with Freygar all season, then I actually think the cavalry attack, or not the cavalry attack, the adrenaline rush normal attack damage is better. Remember, she gives you normal attack crit rate, so yeah, boosting your normal attack damage would be really good. But I also paired with Bakshi on the ground, so egoism is what I went with here, 4% less hero skill damage taken. From there, I went with the head held high, extra rage generation. Now you may think that's kind of a weird choice, don't you want the extra skill damage? But remember, I also was pairing with Freygar, and when I paired with Freygar, the extra hero skill damage is doing a little, but not a lot. So if you're going like a pure skill damage route with like Craig, then I think Intimidation is an easy choice. Because although it's nice to generate rage over time, your goal is in part to charge a ranged unit, get a full rage bar instantly. And in that case, I mean, yes, Rage Restoration is nice to get to your next active skill, but your first active skill, you can just shred them. From there, I went with Perfect Ferocity. Your Legion gains synergy when they enter battle, increasing their hero skill damage by 15%. Obviously, there is a little bit of an identity crisis here with the variety of flyers that are available right now. Like, there's not a lot of pure skill damage flyers that you get to work with other than Craig. So after getting this extra march speed, which is disproportionately good, right? And I went all the way over here. I took Perfect Ferocity. Now you go to the right-hand side of the tree, and there's some cool stuff you can do. So you got 10% march speed. Very good. You get 2% attack. It ain't much, but I think that's a better choice than taking less normal damage. But if you want to be more tanky instead of do more damage, like you could take that. If you wanted to hurt your enemies for hitting you, you could take counter. I don't think that's a good call. So then I went for Rage. So I really like using my active skills more frequently. My active skill has a powerful debuff. It's not just damage. It's making it so they can't do normal attack damage for 3 seconds. So I'm trying to make those happen fast, and you'll see more of why that's the case in just a minute here. So from there, I took Cyclone Seal. When you cast a Rage skill, inflict a slow on the Legion, reducing their march speed by 15% for 3 seconds. Why am I doing that? Well, I'm going to charge a ranged unit. I'm going to instantly use my active skills, and then they're going to be slowed, and they're not getting away from me. So they're dead. So that is why I went for that route. If I was more focused on taking hits, Soul Siphon would be more interesting. I'm not really trying to do that. Counterattacks, having a chance to steal rage, very powerful, but not what I'm here to do. From there, I put 5 points into Intimidation, dealing more hero skill damage. As I mentioned, there's like an identity crisis here. Am I doing skill damage? Do I care about skill damage, or do I not care about skill damage? It's very awkward. With the Bakshi combo, you obviously just want hero skill damage, but you're probably, well, you might use Bakshi as the primary in that instance anyways, but I went for the hero skill damage here. I did put 1 point into Blindside. So when your Legion enters battle, reduce the enemy's march speed by a small amount. You may wonder why 1 point. I'll show you in a bit, but we're just going to say debuffs are important. I put 4 points into Ambush for a small defense break effect, and 1 point into Tremble for a small attack reduction effect. Remember when I said we're going to talk about debuffs? We're going to get to this in a minute. From there, Sage. Your Legion has a 50% chance to gain synergy every time they inflict a debuff. Aha! This is one of the ways in which I care about putting debuffs on an enemy. This will increase my hero skill damage by 5% for 10 seconds. Hey, that ain't bad. I don't know if this Sage synergy buff stacks with Perfect Ferocity. I'm going to assume that it doesn't. But also, my fights often last more than the 10 seconds of initially entering battle. So I think I still get value from Sage over the course of a longer fight. And I certainly think that's better than, like, grants healing whenever your Legion inflicts a debuff. I mean, it only can be triggered once every 10 seconds. It's not terribly exciting. Also, there's a way to gain even more rage. I suppose I could have gone this route. But whenever I take skill damage, I gain rage. I was not really interested in that. Whenever your Legion gains a debuff effect, they have a chance to slow the enemy. I mean, these are interesting ideas, but I think this route gives me more punch. The final thing that I take here is Reticent. When your Legion casts a rage skill, they have a 25% chance to silence the target, preventing them from casting any rage skills for 2 seconds. I think that's a brutal debuff. So I went on the right-hand side of the tree to go the debuff route. I think debuffs are powerful. Makes everything that's hitting the target potentially do better. So like the defense break, for example, or an attack reduction would, make it so that everything hitting the target is taking less counterattack damage. The other way you could go is, however, into the cavalry tree, which is not what I did. But if you did want to go in the cavalry tree, I mean, you could take less counterattack. That's relevant. You could reduce your defense, but I do not like that plan at all. The other alternative here is to do extra damage to marksmen. So if you wanted to hunt marksmen specifically, I think this is a great talent, but that's not really what I'm doing. I am indiscriminately assaulting backline troops that are moving from one position to another. And given that in a zone opening, you're walking for hours of the zone opening, there's a lot of targets of opportunity there that you can ambush that are not going to be marksmen. From here, it just gets weird. Like, after ending the battle, do I want haste? Not really. Do I want less damage taken when I'm marching? I mean, I guess, but at that point, like, am I mostly just running from somebody? Like, I guess less damage when I'm running is fine. From here, I mean, trample, gaining keen after you defeat an enemy legion. If you're a huge whale in like, you supremely overpower everybody, I guess. But these talents really didn't excite me, okay? Entangle is also a super weird talent. I actually can't believe this talent exists. I'm surprised it's here. The march speed of routed enemies is reduced by 4%. I guess it would be a total of 20% when you defeat them. This just feels rude. I mean, I get that slowing your enemy's refresh time is an advantage, but this just feels like a feel bad for the enemy, and I'm actually surprised by this talent's existence. So from here, pitched battle. If your unit count is below 50%, your attack is boosted. I don't love that. After ending battle, you get a heal. I mean, I guess if you're doing a lot of hit and run, like this could be a thing, but I just found myself kind of like unexcited by these talents. The only talent that kind of does excite me over here is Bloodmark. This is a 150 damage factor when you cast a rage skill, but only once every 10 seconds. Why does it excite me? Well, when I charge a ranged unit, my rage bar is instantly full, and then boom, I hit them with a 150 damage factor. That's kind of nice. This is also pretty good. When your legion consists of only cavalry, they'll slow enemy legions when intercepting them and inflicting a defense break, reducing their march speed and their defense. So I also think Inescapable is actually pretty good. So I think these talents are really good. I think the marksman talent's really good, but everything else didn't excite me, which is why I went over here for more debuffs in the control tree. So you may now be wondering, all right, Chisgule, what about the PvP tree? And I actually just think it's kind of unexciting in this instance. You just get so much from the control tree that I like. You get so much that I like in the cavalry tree. If you went in the PvP tree, I mean, you could get 10% march speed over here. I always like march speed. You can get held high rage, which is great. You can increase your damage, but that takes a long time to do, which doesn't excite me. So Luck of the Draw makes it so that when you're launching counterattacks, you have a chance to reduce your damage taken. I mean, your goal is not really to be tanking, in my estimation. I just thought that the talents overall, I mean, march speed is fine, actually. When your legion intercepts an enemy, you gain shelter, you boost your own defense. I don't know. I mean, maybe this could be good, but I was not excited by what my options were in the PvP tree, weirdly enough. Like, I would think that I'd really be hyped about the PvP tree, but I find that I'm not. So, control tree is really, I felt like, where it was at. So why all the debuffs again? So when we actually get a look at the pet options, the pet that's designed for Forondil is the Berserk Phaedrake. And the Berserk Phaedrake is, I mean, hey, look, there's a lot of words here, but it's actually pretty simple. You inflict debuffs on the enemy, and every time you put a debuff on the enemy, you get a stack of fierce marks. And then once your deputy uses a rage skill, a couple seconds later, you're going to do damage to your enemy based on the number of fierce marks you've accumulated. Then the number of fierce marks you have is reset back to 0. So if you inflict cowardice, you get an extra 2 stacks of fierce marks. So why does all this matter? So, you know, I have been kind of, in fact, I would say I've been really unlucky, and I've only ever gotten a 0-star talent skill for the Berserk Phaedrake, despite hunting it for like over a month for a 1-star talent, GG. But you can get up to 9 stacks here, and it's fierce mark stacks times 6. So that would, you know, it's not a ton of damage. You're looking at like 54 damage factor with maximum number of stacks, but it's based off of agility, and my agility is extremely high, which I find can be like kind of like a 3x multiplier, I think, of the amount that's represented here. So you're actually looking at like 160 damage factor with the maximum number of debuff stacks on here. So it starts to be pretty meaningful what your pet could do with all those debuffs. So the question is, well, are you really getting to 9 stacks? And I mean, there were a lot of different debuffs here. So cowardice grants an extra 2 stacks. So I think cowardice might be granting 3 stacks of fierce mark. Is that right? So that if that's true, there's your 3 stacks. If you're awakened, here is potentially another 2 stacks. So you're up to 5. Then from talents, in terms of debuffs, right? Okay, this is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different debuffs you could be applying. So, you know, there's a bunch of ways to be getting stacks. I guess it's a total of 10 potential stacks you can get. And, you know, depending on who your other hero is, you can get more stacks. Bleed is a debuff, right? So here's yet another way to be getting stacks potentially. So I think that if you're going the route of the Berserk Phaedrake, which is probably the way to go, going for all these debuffs, especially when we start getting higher talent skills on our pets, is got to be the way to go. And, you know, look, I'll make a guide about the Berserk Phaedrake, but this is all about doing damage. So if you're going to charge an enemy and automatically get a full rage bar, this is where fierce attack is really important, because your deputy will be casting the rage skill really quickly, like right from the start of the fight. It's like the best use of fierce attack, in my opinion. So if you're going to have arrogance, which is doing damage, and fierce attack, which is doing damage, then I think a skill like Angry Roar, which gives you physical pet crit rate, starts to get really good, where you could do extra damage for whenever your pet is doing physical skill damage. Well, this is physical skill damage, okay? And this is physical skill damage. So, like, yeah, pretty cool, right? I went for some defense break, some attack mitigation, and also crit rate for my hero skills. And there you go. All right. So I think the Berserk Phaedrake is the way to go. The other option, if you want a flying pet, is going to have to be a Golden Rock. Now, I have this 1-star Golden Rock, and I haven't actually put a bunch of great skills onto it yet. For the majority of the season, I was using this 0-star. But as I was describing, if you're going to instantly rage skill somebody from having charged a ranged unit, you want to get fierce attack here. And the thing that this pet is doing is giving you rage accumulation speed. If you had passion, and you most likely won't, because this hero doesn't have a way to get it, then you do damage to the enemy. So it's just giving you rage accumulation speed. It ain't much. So where would this be good? Well, I mean, if you really wanted to min-max, potentially, the Spring Blades is a reason you would use the Golden Rock. So now we get into the artifact section. There's so much to talk about. So Spring Blades are the, you know, it's no secret here, best artifact for cavalry, hands down. And even though I don't have a way to generate passion, which, by the way, let's see here. When you gain it, you get 30% attack for 5 seconds. That's big, right? It's so important that it's almost worth like using the golden rock just to periodically gain passion, which then triggers the spring blades. And I have looked in the logs, that does work that way. So it's like almost worth using a golden rock and missing out on the cowardice damage, right, from that talent skill on the Berserk Phaedrake, just to be able to activate the 30% attack boost over here. But I think even without it, Spring Blades, it's just so much damage. You love to see it. This thing is great. I've been very happy with this, even though I'm using it suboptimally with no way to trigger the passion right now. GG. Hopefully one day I'll get my passion back, chat. But the other options are still great. So I'm using the Spring Blades over here, and I'm using the Sorlin's Blade on my Thea. Remember, I'm using flyers, and I've March speed balanced my flyers, so they're about the same speed. That's why I'm using the Sorlin's Blade. The Thea with Craig combo is a little slow. But if you use this on your Forondil, like obviously you're zoomy, because you have 18% March speed here. Other options would, of course, include a Kingslayer, which is better damage for sure than, you know, the Sorlin's Blade. Not only are you just getting more attack, but the damage is actually just bigger. So, big win on the Kingslayer, if that's a route you want to go, which I certainly can recommend. And, you know, there are two other kind of weird artifacts you can potentially go use here that I think if you're flying with Forondil, you'll never use them. And if you're not flying with Forondil, then you would consider them. One is the Storm Arrows. You can use this to navigate terrain. That is the main value of the Storm Arrows, and it is very good for going across a river. You do need multiple skill levels in this to get enough range to jump most rivers and up most mountains, but once you get a couple skills on your Storm Arrows, yeah, you're looking pretty good to navigate terrain. The same thing is true of the Wolf Woman of Healer. This one is a little weird because, as you can see here, after a period of time, you can teleport back to your starting point, but you can actually negate that by going into a resource node or a city, and then you're good. You won't teleport back. At that point, your teleport back spot disappears, and you cannot teleport back anymore. So, two great ways for cavalry to navigate. And there is the one artifact actually designed for Forondil that I don't use. Now, I have debated this. I mean, this is the Forondil artifact, right? It is the Oath of the Storm Peak, but I don't use it. So, I feel like this would actually be, like, not bad. What does it do? It summons a clone of your Legion. So part of the challenge with this one is you need a higher APM to really use this well. But you summon a clone. Your clone deals 90% less damage and takes a 1,600% more damage. But it's a way to like eke out some extra damage, basically. And it does that not by virtue of like, boom, I got you with damage, but like, you've literally summoned a clone that you need to find a way to get value with over the next 30 seconds. I do feel like I could have done that, and in a lot of my situations, it would have been fine. And in a lot of situations, it just would have been, like, just difficult to use. Like, I think this is really cool, but I also think you need really good micromanagement to actually successfully summon a clone and, like, trick your enemy with a clone. I think, look, if I could wave a magic wand and have this thing and, you know, not spend a bunch of money for it, I would do it. But I prioritized. I got a lot of cavalry artifacts that are good. For me to spend money on this artifact when I could instead spend that same money on troops felt to me like a miss. I think the troops is what I needed, given the depth of cavalry artifacts already available. But there is a passive benefit here that's really good. When you inflict cowardice, you gain rampage. That's a 10% damage dealt boost when maxed here, and it lasts, I think, 10 seconds. So the Oath of the Storm Peak, I think, is actually fine. It's just a little tricky to use, especially if you're using multiple marches. And when you're not being pressured by an enemy, it's very good. When you are being pressured by an enemy, it's more difficult to execute. So it all depends on what kind of situation you like to prioritize. I generally like artifacts that work well if I'm losing and work well if a situation is even. This artifact feels to me like a win more artifact, where if you're winning, you can really crush an enemy that you're already crushing, which is good and all, but I think I prefer to optimize for, does this help me if I'm in trouble, and does this help me break a stalemate? And yes, I learned that way of evaluating a situation from Magic the Gathering board states. Let's freaking go. So anyways, If you're enjoying the video, by the way, consider subscribing to the channel. You like Magic the Gathering? Hey, I don't play it on this channel, but respect. So, all that to say, Forondil's great, man. I've really enjoyed using him. I plan to max him, but as I said, I'm doing it over time. And I think as far as cavalry heroes go, he is just a beast, man. The only other hero that I still need to talk about that is also a beast for cavalry is Theodore. And I'll make a guide for him really, really soon. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. We rallied with Theodore. We garrisoned with Theodore. He is the truth. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that guide. If you're looking for my overall thoughts on like compositions and combos I have been running and very happy with, card will be in the end screen in just a second. Alternatively, if you're looking for my breakdown on kind of what the best artifacts are, I'll share my opinions, card in the end screen in just a second.